Wanna play hide and clap?
Welcome back to the channel, and if you're watching this on day of release, happy Halloween. And to celebrate the spooky season, I'm going to be ranking one of the biggest modern day horror franchises, and what some would say the scariest franchise out today, and that's the Conjuring universe. But before we get started, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It'll help this channel grow, help me get out to more people. Hit the like button, share.
What are you waiting for?
And with that out the way, let's continue on. Now I'm going to give you a little background of my experience with the Conjuring universe. I'm the type of person that when a new movie is announced, especially the ones that's involving Ed and Lorraine Warren, I usually do a little background to see if it was really based off a true story. And if so, I do a little background to really see what really happened. Even though I know they embellish a lot of these movies to make it more theatrical, I do like to see the background to see what really happened and how it transpired on the screen. And the movies that's normally based off the real events, depending on your beliefs, are the ones that I tend to like more than the others. And I would say maybe about 3 or 4 of these are definitely based off of alleged true events, and the rest of them are just made for Hollywood. So that may play a factor into where I rank some of these movies. So if your favorite one isn't at the top, just keep in mind this is just my opinions, the way I view each and every one of these movies. And just let me know yours down in the comment section down below. So without further ado, let's get things started.
And here we go.
Now there's 9 movies to rank in this franchise, even though the studio only claims 8. I'm going to do 9 because my number 9 pick, and sometimes 9 and 8 can change depending on the movie, because they're both equally bad as far as I'm concerned. So number 9 for me is the movie that even the studio do not claim, and that's The Curse of La Llorona, which came out in 2019. Now on paper, this should have been a great movie. But this movie is the prime example of a great story and bad execution. Because one of the biggest drawbacks of this movie, for me at least, was the bad CGI within this movie. Especially every time La Llorona show up and she do this scream and all of a sudden her face is stretched out. It looks so fake that it really takes you out of what's going on. Because a lot of times the atmosphere in this movie is actually okay. And this movie was directed by Michael Chase, who, as you will see, the bottom 2 movies in the franchise was directed by him, so I'm not a fan of his work. Even though he did manage to slip one in, and I'll get to that one later. But the CGI of La Llorona really takes me out of it. Another thing that's a bit misstep with this movie is the location. The Curse of La Llorona is a famous Mexican folktale, and the fact that they moved the location from Mexico to California, it really makes no sense to me. This one could have been good, but the execution was very bad, to the point that where this one bombed at the box office. And the only movie within this universe that, regardless of the reviews, did bad at the box office, that the studio totally disowned this movie, even though there's a guest appearance by Annabelle and a priest from the first Annabelle movie. But I'm going to include it, and it sits here at number 9. Coming in right after that, not too far, is 2021's The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. Now, this movie is based off the 1981 real-life story of Ernie Johnson, who killed his landlord and claimed he had no recollection, and in the process said the devil made him do it. Now, the problem with this movie, again, is directed by Michael Chase, and for some reason he has this thing of using bad CGI. This movie starts off with bad CGI exorcism. The beginning could have been good, but the boy in this movie looked completely fake, especially at the beginning when he's twisting it. It just looks so horrible that it immediately take you out the movie. You know this is not your typical Conjuring movie. Because at the point when this movie came out, if it had The Conjuring in its title, there was a higher expectation for the movie. And this movie dropped the ball. Now, I was excited when the movie finally came out, because it did come out in early 2021 at the height of the pandemic. So everything was shut down, and it was like one of the first big movies that I remember, along with Mortal Kombat, that came out on Max or Peacock. And when I watched it, I was just highly disappointed. This movie just have a low budget feel. It feel like a made for TV movie. The only thing that stops this movie from being at the bottom is the story between Ed and Lorraine and the convention of their love. That storyline within itself was entertaining enough. The characters, the actors that portray these characters, they did a good enough job to make you care about what happened to them. And be honest with you, that's the only reason this movie isn't dead last. This is a movie that I only seen one time along with The Curse of La Llorona, and I really have no intention of seeing it again. So, The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, is number 8. Now, all the movies from here on out are decent to great. I really don't have any big problems with them. Some I just like more than others. And for me, number 7 is a movie that I think is a little underrated, get unfairly criticized, and that is The Nun, which came out in 2018. Now, this was a first-time watch for me because when The Nun first came out, after the reviews came out of how bad it was and how disappointed people was in the movie, I just skipped this one. And I just watched it recently, actually after I watched The Nun 2. And I'm gonna be honest with you, even though I do understand most of the criticisms, this movie is actually okay. Granted, it suffers from the same thing that the Annabelle movie suffered from, where the character of Violet made such an impact in the Conjuring movie. The expectations were so high that nothing they could have done would have satisfied the people. So the biggest problem with this movie when I watched it from the very first time was this movie does have a lot of jump scares. It's one of those movies where Violet really doesn't do much, where Violet just in the background, the camera would pan one way, then come back, then pan again, and now all of a sudden Violet comes out from a different direction, just grab a character, most time not killing them because 9 times out of 10 they get away. And it's just like a bad carnival ride. This one takes place really in one location, so it's also hindered by that. But the acting in this movie is fine. It's pretty good. If this is one of your worst horror movies in the franchise, I think you're doing very well. While it's not up to the expectations of my top movies in this franchise, it's not as bad as people say it is. And if you haven't seen this movie in a while, or if you haven't given this movie a chance, go ahead and check it out. Right now, all of these movies are on HBO Max at the time of this recording, so you can marathon each and every one of these movies if you want to for Halloween. But check it out, give it a go. The Nun sits here at number 7. Coming up next in the number 6 spot is 2019's Annabelle Come Home. Now, theoretically, this is not really a bad movie. This movie to me just does not fit into the Conjuring universe. This is one of those movies where the story is just made up for cinematic purpose. This movie tells the story of a young girl that just lost her father, and she's very aware that the Warrens deal with the spiritual world, and she sneaks into their house when they're gone along with their daughter, sneaks downstairs, I should say, and try to communicate with her dad, but instead she released something else. While this movie really doesn't have a strong story, this movie is just a display of all the Warrens' adventures. All the story, all the things that they encounter, it kind of gives a bunch of winks and nods to different things. The little werewolf scene was pretty cool, it was okay. But as far as what I go to a Conjuring movie to watch, especially when they advertise Ed and Lorraine in the movie, even though they're only at the beginning and end, it's just not my cup of tea. While it's decent, it's a fair watch, it's definitely not the worst. It's far from the best for me. So Annabelle Come Home sits here at number 6. And continuing on, coming in at number 5 is the original Annabelle movie, which came out in 2014. Now, this movie got a lot of backlash when it first came out, and that was primarily due to the high expectations. Our first encounter of Annabelle came from the original Conjuring movie, and that first 10 to 15 minutes, just telling the story of Annabelle was so darn creepy, it made such an impact that when they announced Annabelle was getting his own spin-off, expectations were through the roof. But upon rewatching this movie, really it's okay. It's not as bad as I really thought it was. Granted, it's not as creepy, but now that I really understand the lore of Annabelle, and that it's not really the doll that's possessed, it's the demon that's manipulating the doll to kind of scare people so they will weaken the soul so they can be invited. It makes more sense. Now this movie opens up with a great first act, which ties into Annabelle Creation, when a girl from that movie attacks a family who's expecting a young child, sacrifice herself, and her blood gets on the Annabelle doll. That's how Annabelle becomes possessed. So it opens up very strong. The rest of the movie is just your typical horror movie where nothing really happens. Just a bunch of things to scare the people involved, where you may turn on the stove, walk out the room, come back, it's off, or vice versa. The lights cut on and off by themselves. Nothing real good. But what really improved this movie and why I say this movie is overrated is the third act. The third act of this movie is actually pretty good, and it's actually kind of creepy. From the moment where the mother in this movie goes down to the basement of her apartment and the demon chases her from there, and to the end where a friend sacrifices herself to save the child, it's actually a fantastic third act. That's what elevates this movie. That's what keeps this movie from being closer to the bottom. So again, if you haven't seen Annabelle since it first came out, or try to avoid it because of what you heard, give this movie a shot. Just remember, this movie is more of a slow burn, where a lot of stuff really is not happening. It's more creepy imagery and things happening to weaken the individuals, to test their faith. But once you get past the second act, the third act is okay. It's outstanding. And for me, it's number 5. Coming in right after that is the newest movie on this list, and that's The Nun 2, which came out earlier this year. Now, I'm not really going to go much into detail about the things I do and don't like about this movie, because I do have a video up already reviewing this movie. So if you haven't checked that out, I'm going to put a card up there somewhere up around here. Click on that to get my deeper thoughts. But to sum it up, this movie was better than what I expected. Considering that I did see this movie before I saw the original Nun and the reputation that The Nun had, I really wasn't expecting much. And considering this had the same director, Michael Chase, who has directed my bottom 2 movies, I really wasn't excited to see this movie. But when I did go see it, I was very surprised by how intense this movie actually is. Considering there is still problems with Valid just standing in the background, jumping out, not really doing much. But on the flip side, Valid does kill more people and does go on the offensive more in this movie, and you get to see the carnage. So The Nun 2, I think, is a fairly decent movie. If you haven't seen this and you'll wait for it to come out later, it's out on HBO Max now. It premiered Friday, I believe. So go check it out, give it a chance. And for me, The Nun 2 is the 4th best Conjuring movie ever made. Now we're here at the top 3. And I'm going to go ahead and say these top 3 are not only 3 of my favorite movies within the Conjuring universe, these are 3 of my favorite horror movies of all time. On any given day, any one of these can be my favorite movie, but starting off right now, as of today, the number 3 best movie in the Conjuring universe for me is Annabelle Creation, which came out in 2017. Now I'm going to go ahead and set the record straight. After the disappointment of the original Annabelle, this movie right here was the Annabelle movie that we wanted from the get-go. This, in my opinion, is the scariest movie within the Conjuring universe. I don't know if it's the fact that you're dealing with children, which are vulnerable, which we have more sympathy towards, or the creepy house. Whatever the thing is, the setting of this movie is perfect. The story that they tell the young girl that end up getting killed at the very beginning, and the reason why this family allows this demon in, who disguise themselves as their deceased daughter, it's really one of the best stories that they ever came up with within this universe. And I'm gonna be honest with you, if there was some way they could have tied the Warrens into this movie and had them come save the day, or had them involved in this, this would be my favorite Conjuring movie. But because the Warrens not in it, it's the only reason why this movie sits at number 3. But if you haven't seen this movie, please do yourself a favor. Stop the video right now. You got HBO Max. Go check it out. Annabelle Creation is not only the best spin-off movie within this franchise, but it's arguably the scariest movie in this franchise, and it's definitely one of the scariest, creepiest movies that you would ever see, especially a modern day horror. So Annabelle Creation, number 3, which leads my top 2 movies, the original Conjuring and Conjuring 2. Now on any given day, like I said before, these can flip-flop. If you pick my number 2 is your number 1, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not really going to argue with you. Both of these movies are fantastic. Both of these movies changed the horror genre. But for me, coming in right now, number 2 is the original Conjuring, which came out in 2013. Now this is the movie that set the franchise off and it really brought horror back to its roots.
Lord, I'm having a heart attack. Damn, this is some scary shit.
Now the time when this movie came out, we were getting a few good horror movies here and there, but they were primarily remakes of established properties. Now this movie came out of nowhere and scared the living crap out of people. This movie was so scary that people were actually having headaches and nightmares and passing out in the theater and when they went home. But the reason why this movie is held in high standard for me is it's actually a good creepy movie and the backstory is actually creepier. This movie is based off of real life events. Even though they did embellish a little bit for cinematic purposes, they kind of compressed what went on for 15-20 years with that Herring family within an hour and a half, 2-hour runtime. Where most of the things in this movie, technically, if you believe the Warrens, happen, depending on your religious belief and what you believe in the spiritual world. So when you take that into consideration, especially when like I said in the beginning, when you do your research on the real life events and then watch the movie, it just adds an extra layer to the movie. It's fantastic. It set off multiple spin-offs because like I said before, we got a cameo by Annabelle in this movie. At the beginning, we got the guy from The Nun. So that was an introduction to that spin-off. And it set the tone for things to come. And the chemistry that the two actors had that portrays Ed and Lorraine Warren is outstanding. Their relationships, their back and forth, a lot of times it's actually more entertaining than some of the events going on. You really believe that they love each other. You really believe that they're doing it because of their faith. They do a phenomenal job of expressing that, especially Vera Farmiga, who's outstanding in this franchise and probably the person you think of the most when you say The Conjuring. So The Conjuring, 2013, number 2.
Who's ever down there? I'm gonna lock you in now. Ah! Help! Andrea! Help!
Which leaves my number 1 best Conjuring movie in the franchise, and that's The Conjuring 2, which came out in 2016. Now the reason why this is number 1 for me, and if you want to say the original is number 1, fine, but for me, the reason why is because of the story. The real life backstory in the Enfield house or incident is actually creepy. Now doing my research on this one, I kind of vaguely remember this story when I was a child, but when it was announced this movie was coming out, and then this is the main plot that they were going with, I did my research, and this was the first time I did research on something like this where I got goosebumps and chills. Watching the real life footage of that little girl talking in that deep, demonic voice scared the crap out of me. And going into the movie, it carried on with the story they told. They portrayed it very well.
These teenage sisters believe they're haunted by a poltergeist.
I was going to ask the same question as I asked earlier. How many voices are there?
600.
600 the voices.
I know the joke.
How many really are there, Margaret?
I think so far we've had 10
Right.
sensible voices.
And this was also the formal introduction of Valak. Now, throughout all these tense scenes, another reason why this was my favorite is while all hell is breaking loose, to comfort the family, they showed the character of Ed and Lorraine. When Ed takes the time to sing a song to calm the family down, the old Elvis Presley song, Why the Fools Fall in Love. And for a split moment, you forget about all of the drama that they're going through. You get to see the family dynamic, watch them bond, and then as soon as that over with, all hell continues to break loose.
Wise men say only fools rush in. Thank you. Hey, don't laugh now. But I can't help falling in love with you.
This movie has iconic scene after iconic scene, from the little boy that was trying to sleep, rolling the ball out, and then something throws the ball back, to you can see the image of the old man in the TV saying, "Get out, this is my house," to the introduction of Valak, and the list goes on and on and on. This is what a sequel's supposed to be, and the fact that it started off with the Amityville house, which I do hope we get either with the Conjuring 4 or the Conjuring 5, that added to the real life events of the Enfield story, which there's actual documentation from police officers that this stuff happened. They have no explanation. This is the creepiest, this is one of the scariest movies I ever seen. This is one of the best movies in the Conjuring universe, and for me, it's #1.
You believe us, don't you?
Sensing a presence?
I'm not sensing anything. All I can sense is their own fear.
Honey, you're bleeding. What is happening?
I had a premonition of your death.
Who's that?
The family's just a pawn. Something inhuman wants to kill you. If we keep doing this, you're going to die.
So, what do you guys think? Do you agree with my list? There's one that you think should have been higher, or you think I'm right on the nose? Let me know what you guys think. Remember, these are just my opinions, so let me know your opinions in the comment section down below. And if you haven't done so already, you made it this far in the video, please subscribe to my channel. And until the next time, keep your eyes open for my next video.